I will call to order the May 6th meeting of the Verona Plan Commission. We'll begin with the roll call, please.
Commissioner Linder.
Here.
Commissioner Ritter is excused. Mayor Hockemer.
Here.
Commissioner Horsfall.
Here.
Commissioner Lytle.
Here.
Commissioner Heinzen.
Here. We have a quorum and we will proceed. Included with your packet were the minutes of the April 4th meeting of the Plan Commission. What is your pleasure?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion by Mr. Linder. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lytle. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the previous meeting? Any additions or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of the minutes signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And that motion carries. First order of business, then, or next order of business, I should say, is a public hearing on the conditional use permit amendment to the Epic Systems Corporation Group Development to allow for the construction of an underground parking structure at 1979 Milky Way. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Lytle. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Heinzen. All those in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. We are now in the public hearing stage. Adam, do you want to give some background first? Okay.
Epic is, excuse me. Epic is proposing to construct a 1,500 vehicle underground parking structure that would be 3 to 4 levels underground. The proposed structure would be accessible by tunnels. The proposed request does require a conditional use permit amendment to the Epic Group development. It also requires site plan approval of the structure itself. The structure is for Campus 4. Campus 4 buildings right now have not been submitted. That may come forward in the future, but right now the public hearing is only for the actual parking structure. Staff did review the proposal. As I stated previously, it is entirely underground, so it will not be visible from the surface. It does meet all required setbacks. Access to it is a twofold question, based on the fact that right now Northern Lights is aligned as shown on the screen here, but in the future it will be realigned. Presently, access to the structure would be taken from the existing Northern Lights using the contractor road. There would also be 3 tunnels accessing each level of the actual structure itself.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre, for the background. Mr. Dickman, did you want to make any statements, or are you here just to answer questions if there are some? Oh, okay, thank you. So we are in the public hearing stage on this agenda item. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this agenda item? Is there anyone that wishes to speak under the public hearing on this agenda item? Third and final time, anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this agenda item? Seeing none, I would accept the motion and to close the public hearing.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Horsfall. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Linder. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. Mr. Sayre, agenda item 4A. You want to provide some background, please?
Sure, as stated previously, access would be accessible from 3 tunnels, each going to a different level. When the road is realigned in the future, access would be from a new intersection with Cross Country Road. Cars going to this ramp would head north and be rerouted off in this general direction, and there would be the ramp would be accessible then by the 3 existing tunnels. No landscaping plans were submitted with the proposal. That's because it's actually entirely underground. Drainage and stormwater, no drainage and stormwater plans were submitted as well because there is no increase in impervious surface. As part of the conditional use process, the zoning ordinance requires staff to go through 6 general findings of fact and 4 specific findings of fact. And we have done that, and we find that it does meet the zoning requirements and is consistent with the requirements of the zoning ordinance. With that being said, staff is recommending the Plan Commission approve the underground structure at 197 Milky Way, and also provide a recommendation to the Common Council to approve the conditional use permit amendment for the construction of the underground parking structure.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. If we are to have action on these items, the next two items, it would be a recommended action to the Common Council. Is there any discussion or any potential motions at this point? Mr. Lytle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One clarification. Are there actually two things we would be taking on action on with this item? One is actually approval of the site plan, and the second is a recommendation to council for approval of the amendment to this conditional use permit.
Mr. Sayre.
Yes, you're right.
And do we believe it's appropriate to handle those as one motion?
No, separate motions, please.
Very good. I would then like to make a motion to approve the site plan for the underground parking structure at 1979 Milky Way.
We have a motion by Mr. Lytle. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Horsfall. We are open for discussion on the motion. Are there any questions? Mr. Heinzen?
Sure, and just to refresh my memory, what is planned is a building to be placed or built on top of the parking structure eventually, right?
Yes,
Sayre.
possibly in the future, yes.
Possibly in future. And I guess my concern would be, I would anticipate that there's a strong likelihood that that building will be built at some time in the future. But should it never be built, for whatever reason, we would end up having a, 3-story parking garage into the ground. And I think that it'd be reasonable to have, some contingency that would require the removal of that should the buildings never be built or the parking structure never be built, or parking structure never be used.
Mr. Dickman, if you'd respond, please.
If you recall, at the last meeting, I mentioned that we would need this parking structure to accommodate our current needs, whether we build any more buildings or not. We have 4,500 parking stalls on campus right now. We have about 5,700 or 5,800 employees on the campus, plus we have visitors. We want to get rid of all our temporary surface lots and put it all underground. So whether we build the buildings on top of it or not, we would want the parking structure because we want to get rid of the surface parking.
All right, thank you.
Further questions of Mr. Linder?
Do you have plans for any surface parking for buses anywhere? I see parking, various spots around Verona. Do you?
No. Most of the buses that are coming on a day-to-day basis aren't our buses. They're buses coming from the hotel, they're hotel shuttles.
Okay.
And I think, I'm not sure, but I think they run in the morning and they run in the afternoon. And when they aren't on those shuttle runs, I think they go back to Badger's location. We really, I can't think of, again, I don't know where Badger, a lot of the large buses coming that are the hotel shuttles, I don't know where they live when they aren't doing the runs. I do know things like the Holiday Inn Express, those shuttles go back to the Holiday Inn Express, and I think a lot of the other hotels that happens. The only other time it would happen is during users group meeting, which is the September meeting, where because of the number of buses we're running, we queue up buses either on site if possible or other locations, just because we're running so many buses during that 1 week period, or actually the 4-day period.
I was bringing it up last week. There was 8 to 10 buses parked at the truck stop last week during.
We had our advisory councils going last week, and those were, again, shuttles. We had about, over the last 2 weeks, we had about 4,000, 5,000 customers in for advisory councils.
Mm-hmm.
Those are one-off. I mean, if required, we could find a place on campus to have those buses sit. But we want to get rid of, we have a neighborhood of 1,200 or more surface parking lots, stalls right now, just because we don't have enough underground parking. We want to get rid of that stuff.
I was asking in case, potentially you lose that spot, you know, what would, if you had plans in the future for.
Yeah, we would find someplace on site to queue those buses up.
Okay. I have a second question.
Go ahead, Mr. Linder.
So on the map here, is there a reason why it goes way up here as opposed to, is there something up here we can't see, or is it
No,
topography?
it's
or-
part of it, it's a wooded area. The reason it loops up that way is there's a haul road that was in there from the time the Fosbins owned the property. And we're following that route. Plus, we have to get over, there's a major drainage way that goes through there. And by not cutting down a bunch of trees and following that existing path through the wooded area and the drainage way, we felt it was a better way to enter the campus. We don't have any intent of going in and destroying that wooded area. So we're trying to minimize the adverse impact on the wooded area and follow an existing route.
Okay. So then when you build it initially, you just use the existing contractor entrance as long as you can, and then
That's correct.
until
And
this
then,
other stuff gets.
right.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments from Mr. Horsfall?
It's really for the engineer, I guess. I assume that the roads that are going into the parking are gonna be like an urban section, like curb and gutter? Or it's gonna be, and then the question, I guess, is the lower levels at 997, and what's the elevation of the basin, I guess? Where it's gonna be draining to? I hate to have you dig a hole down so deep and then.
Well, these won't be any lower than, for example, our existing campus 2 parking structure goes down 4 levels.
Oh, it does. So it goes on the same elevation as?
Yeah, actually, I don't think it'll go down quite as deep, and actually, deep space is deeper.
But you're not draining water to deep space, right? You have your roadways
Oh.
coming in, and I assume in the urban section, you're gonna have them draining.
We'll drain it into storm retention pond number 4.
Okay, so that's low enough that'll.
That's right.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's really the only question I had.
Further questions or comments? If not, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Mr. Sarah, any additional things to say on agenda item 4B?
No.
Do we have any, again, this would be a recommendation to the Common Council. Are there questions or any potential motions? Mr. Lytle?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The other motion would be to recommend approval. I would make a motion to recommend approval to Common Council of the amendment to EPIC's group development conditional use permit to allow for the construction of the underground parking structure.
We have a motion by Mr. Lytle. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Heinzen. We are open for discussion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. We are on agenda item number 5, which is also a public hearing. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Linder. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Horsfall. All those in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries. We're in the public hearing stage. Mr. Sayre, if you would provide the background, please.
EPIC is proposing to replat and divide portions of the existing Cross Point, Meister Edition, and EPIC plats. The proposed replat requires vacation of public right-of-ways and public ways. In order to, once they replat it, they're proposing to redivide it by CSM. By ordinance, this requires a public hearing and also requires a longer process that also involves state statute approval, or not state statute, but circuit court approval as well.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. Again, is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this agenda item under public hearing? If there is, if you would please come to the podium, state your name and address. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this agenda item? Third and final time under public hearing, anyone that wishes to speak on this agenda item? Seeing none, I would accept the motion to close the public hearing. We have a motion by Mr. Horsfall. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Linder to close the public hearing. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. And we are on agenda item 5A. And I'll just remind the Plan Commission that agenda items 5A, B, and C would also be recommendations to the Common Council. Mr. Sayre?
Epic is proposing to replat and redivide the lands within the Cross Point Meister Edition and Epic plats. Right now, Epic owns the existing Epic plat, which is this area here, and also they own the Cross Point subdivision, which is the area north here and bounded by this bluish line. They're also in the process of buying the Meister Edition plat, which is in this brown area here. As part of this process, they are realigning Northern Lights Road. So the existing Northern Lights is at approximately this angle running this way. As part of the process, the city and Epic would vacate the existing roadway and Epic would reconstruct a new Northern Lights as shown on this CSM. With the replat process, these subdivisions have existing single-family duplex and multifamily lots in them. Specifically, the Cross Point subdivision, which is in this blue area again, it has 75 single-family lots. It has 10 duplex lots, which comes up to 20 duplex units, and also has up to 132 multifamily dwelling units. The Meister Edition would result, it has 46 single-family lots, 15 duplex lots, which is 30 duplex units, and then has a total of 130 multifamily dwelling units that could be constructed there. So that accounts to a total of 433 residential units that if this would have been built out, that would have occurred. But obviously with the proposed replat and CSM, Epic is proposing to do different things out there. And that would involve future Campus 4 in this area, which is the parking structure was just approved, and then a possible Campus 5 in this area. But plans for those have not been submitted. During the replat and the redivision process, we've held numerous public meetings and hearings to discuss the roadway improvements out in the area. The last meeting we had was April 23rd to review the traffic impact analysis that was prepared by AECom. And at that meeting, it discussed the roadway improvements for the new Northern Lights, but also Northern Lights or Nine Mound Road as you go to County Highway PD, and also the intersection improvements at the County Highway, at State Highway 151 and Highway 18. Those improvements have been incorporated into this CSM, at least this portion of it, to make sure we can build what was in that traffic analysis. So the certified survey maps, there's 3 of them in particular. They're divided out on the screen here as Epic CSM, Cross Point CSM, and Meister CSM. For the most part, everything north and west of the new Northern Lights, that would be for future Epic campuses. The lands in this area along here would be used as green space and would also be for berming to screen the adjacent residential properties from the future campuses in that area. As well, there are 2 outlots, an outlot being here, and this would be used for open space, and this outlot 3, which would be for a future park. It would be dedicated to the city. There is also a large drainage way which runs between outlot 2 that would be provided to the city as an easement in the near future. One of the questions we've raised during this is at some point we've asked Epic to come back with a actual formal plat of the entire area. There's a lot of lot lines out there, but we've asked they come back once that TIF district does close out to kind of clean up some lot lines and make it a little clearer, because the CSM, it puts a lot of lot lines into the actual, what they own. So at some point in the near future, we anticipate they'll come back and do a complete plat of the area to kind of clean up what's out there. So the process for this is the Plan Commission does recommend to the Common Council. If the Common Council approves it, that's not the end of it. It still has to go to Circuit Court, and that's required by state statute. When roadways are being vacated in public ways, there's an extra level of process in there as well. So with that being said, and the agenda has 3 separate action items, and the reason for that is that Epic owns 2 out of the 3 of these areas. So they've asked that when it goes to Circuit Court, the Circuit Court will look at each one individually, so that the motion would have to be made for each one of these. And with that being said, staff is recommending the Plan Commission forward a recommendation to the or the Common Council to approve the CSMs with the following conditions. The first condition would be to, 1, Dane County Circuit Court to vacate the portion of the plat included within the CSM, including the vacation of areas dedicated to the public. 2, the city and the property owner, being Epic, entering into an agreement for the public use of the existing Northern Lights Road while the new roadway is being constructed. And 3 would be for the property owner, once again Epic, to provide all necessary easements, including utility easements and drainage easements in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you've heard the explanation. There are 3 different properties, so we need to take action on each one separately. And there would be recommendations to the Common Council. Are there any potential motions or any discussion at this point? Mr. Linder?
Yeah, I guess my concern on this project at this point is that we don't know what they're building, and I find it hard to decide the way the road should be before we know what they're building in there. To me, it's kind of the opposite of what I think the CUP should be adjusted for what they're building before they move the road, as that could placement of the buildings. Maybe we want the road farther north, maybe we want it farther south. I don't know, depends on where the buildings are, in my opinion. So I think this is kind of the opposite way I would feel comfortable doing it.
Mr. Sayre?
One of the reasons why Epic went with the CSM route instead of the plat route was they actually understand there could be some minor adjustments in the roadway. So with the CSM, you could easily make minor adjustments to the roadway itself. So that's why it's the CSM. So that is possible to do in the future if adjustments are necessary.
During the last meeting, they said that if the road would move farther north, they would not purchase the Heinrichs property. And if the Heinrichs property is not purchased, then we would have had vacated a plat on that, and now it becomes no longer residential, it becomes the new plat, and he could build a lot of different stuff on it. Is that correct? Non-residential buildings such as daycare.
Well,
Center.
the zoning is the next. I can get into that briefly. The zoning, one of the conditions in there was the zoning would not become effective until the actual circuit court process was completed. So if for some reason that wouldn't happen, and Epic and the current property owner wouldn't go through that process, the zoning wouldn't kick in until the circuit court actually officially vacates the existing plat.
Is that the point at which the contract is consummated between the two?
I don't know.
Okay.
Mr. Dickman, if you would, please.
The contract will not be completed until the circuit court approves the replat and with the zoning. If the zoning isn't there, the contract does not go through.
I was just wondering if it was possible to get it rezoned and not have their contract where you would purchase the land go through. That's what I'm wondering. If somehow Mr. Heinrichs would end up with property was rezoned.
As Adam just stated, the rezoning will only be effective after we purchase the property.
Okay.
Plus, if you look at the way things are laid out, the rezoning south of the proposed realignment of Northern Lights is not an urban or suburban industrial zoning. What is it, Adam? It's
RA, agricultural land, so open space.
It's open space. So in the event it would, which it isn't, the worst case situation, what you hypothesized, is that would be zoned as open space.
Mr. Linder?
One follow-up, Mr. Dickman. Is there a reason why you don't want to show buildings yet on that property?
Because we're focusing on trying to come up with the campus for buildings. as I mentioned at the last meeting, is because of the sequencing, we're trying to get the Campus 1 or Campus 4 parking structure going. We're trying to design the connection between Campus 4 and Campus 2, including a new food service building, and the buildings that go with Campus 4. That's a lot of building, and it takes a lot of design time to do it. So right now, what we're doing is just focusing on the immediate task. Those are the buildings we need now. We hypothesize there may be a Campus 5 in our future. We aren't sure of it. But right now, what's urgent to us is Campus 4, and that's where we're focusing our efforts. Plus, we've got a little bit on our plate right now anyway, as far as finishing up the farm campus and deep space.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions from the Plan Commission? Seeing no further questions, again, we have the three separate actions before us. I'd remind you that the contingencies that staff is recommending is that the City of Verona requests that Dane County Circuit Court vacate the portion of the plat included within the CSM, including vacation of areas dedicated to the public in that portion of the plat. The City of Verona and the property owner shall enter into an agreement for the public use of the existing Northern Lights Road while the new roadway is being constructed. And then finally, the property owner shall provide all necessary easements, including utility and drainage easements. And these would be the conditions, the recommended conditions on all three of the next items. Is there further discussion or any potential motions at this point?
I just got one more question.
Go ahead, Mr. Linder.
Adam, when you said the road can be, you say adjusted, how far is, like,
It would just minor adjustments, or
what's a minor adjustment?
as the design work takes place from an engineering standpoint, that's when minor, if additional widths are needed or it needs to be shrunk, usually it's additional widths that are the issue, but that usually occurs during the design process of the road, and you're not talking much. You're talking a few feet on each side.
So-
You're not talking right now. The right of way is shown as 180 feet. I don't know if Bob has any thoughts on right of way widths.
Mr. Gunlock?
The 180 feet should be sufficient to put in the roadway with a center median and the path, the bicycle path.
Mr. Linder?
So basically, we prove this and it goes to the council, I understand, but the road will be where where it shows on the plan at this point. You can't move it 100 feet.
Correct, unless they came back with a new CSM. The reason that with the CSM, if they went the plat route, they'd be back doing this again if there was a minor adjustment. They have to go through the city again and back to the circuit court again. And the intention was, we kind of recognized there could be some very minor changes to it, and we just didn't want to have this 6-month process to make a foot here or there.
I understand.
Further questions or comments from the Planning Commission? Mr. Horsfall?
At this time, I'd like to make a recommendation to the Common Council that CSM for Epic Systems Corporation to replat lands located with the Epic plat. Proposed CSM will vacate a portion of the existing Northern Lights Road, create 2 lots, and dedicate lands for future realignment of Northern Lights Road.
We have a motion by Mr. Horsfall. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Heinzen. Discussion on the motion. Is there any further? Mr. Lytle?
Two points of clarification, if possible. Are we handling all 3 CSMs as one agenda item, or were you making that recommendation specific to the Crosspoint CSM?
Separately. We need to do them separately.
Yes.
And also, just one clarification. There was also 3 conditions or attached to that.
Right, include those conditions that the mayor had spoken of earlier.
So, Mr. Horsfall, your motion is, it includes the conditions and is specific to the Epic plan. So agenda 5A.
Correct.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Lytle?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To clarify, Mr. Sayre, you mentioned that the additional condition, condition 3, was around providing necessary easements. Are those easements spelled out specifically at some location, or is it essentially implying that a mutually agreeable easement to the city and Epic Systems would be achieved?
Mr. Sarah?
Yeah, right now, through, especially Outlot 2, there's a large drainage ditch that runs through there. And it's just having the city attorney and work with Epic attorneys as well to draft the language to make sure that nothing changes out there. And it's just a formality. There's also some utilities easements that just need to be redrafted again. I spoke with the city attorney a couple days ago, and he had no concerns with doing it, after the fact, even after it's taken care of. But specifically looking at that drainage one and some of the utilities, that's what we had in mind.
Thank you. Just thank you for those clarifications. Not to belabor this point, but I just want to point out that there's a lot of ways this whole process could have gone down, and I think the efforts of city staff and the efforts of Epic to do public outreach early in the process and hold a series of public input sessions. I know some of that input early on was not very positive, and I'm sure there are still people that would have preferred that this not happen at all, but I think overall the combination of the traffic study that was done, the public meetings and how that affected the overall plan, the addition of more park and open space for the city of Verona, and the ability for our largest employer to accommodate future growth makes this a good thing overall for the city to do. So I'll be supporting this.
Thank you for your comments, Patrick. Further questions or comments on the motion? Again, this is specific to agenda item 5A, the Epic plat. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
And that motion carries. We'll let the minutes reflect that Mr. Linder voted no. We are on agenda item 5B. Any discussion or potential motions? This would be specific to the Cross Point plant. Mr. Horsfall?
I'd like to make another shot at it. I'd like to make a recommendation to the council to approve the CSM for Epic Systems Corporation to replat lands located within the Cross Point plat. The proposed CSM will vacate a portion of the existing Northern Lights Road, vacate previously platted roadways, create 4 lots in dedicated lands for future realignment of Northern Lights Road, and then also the conditions that you had mentioned before.
We have a motion. You've heard the motion from Mr. Horsfall. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Heinzen. We are open for discussion on the motion. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no.
No.
Again, the motion carries. We'll let the minutes reflect that Mr. Linder voted no. We are on agenda item 5C. Again, this is specific to the Meister edition. Is there any discussion or any potential motions at this time? Mr. Horsfall?
I'd like to make a recommendation to the council that they approve the certified survey map for Heinrichs Development Group to replat lands located within the Meister addition to Westridge plat. The proposed CSM will vacate previously platted roadways, create 4 lots, and dedicate lands for future roadways, plus the additions that you had mentioned previously.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Horsfall. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Heinzen. We are open for discussion on the motion. Are there any questions or comments on the motion? Questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no.
No.
Motion carried, and we will let the minutes reflect that Mr. Linder voted no. We are now on agenda item 6, which is also a public hearing. This is on the zoning map amendment to rezone multiple parcels located within the Epic plat, Cross Point plat, and Meister addition to Westridge plat from their current zoning classifications of rural agriculture, neighborhood residential, community residential, mixed residential, urban residential, suburban commercial, and public institutional to suburban industrial, rural agricultural, and public institutional. The proposed zoning map amendment will allow for the realignment of the Northern Lights Road, the feature of expansion at the Epic campus, and open space and parkland. I would accept the motion to go into open session. or go into the open for the public hearing. Do I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Lytle. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Linder. All those in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. We are in the public hearing stage. Mr. Sayre, if you'd provide the background, please.
Epic's proposing to zone lands to accommodate the previously discussed CSMs. Proposed zoning would be suburban industrial to match the existing campus, public institutional for a park, and then rural agricultural for a open space area.
For the background from Mr. Sayre, is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this agenda item during the public hearing? Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this agenda item? If so, if you'd come forward, state your name and address. Is there anyone that wishes to speak on this agenda item? Seeing none, I would accept the motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Horsfall. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Linder to close the public hearing. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. Mr. Sayre, if you would, please.
The proposed rezoning request would accommodate the future expansion of Epic and also provide the open space as previously discussed. The area shown here in the dark purplish bluish color, that would be the Campus 4 and Campus 5 areas zoned SI, suburban industrial. There is also an outline up here which is adjacent to that area, which would also be zoned suburban industrial. And then the lands kind of along this long sweeping area, that would be zoned RA, which is rural agriculture, and that's where you'd have the open space and the berming for the adjacent residential properties. There's also an outlot shown here, which would be zoned RA as well for open space, and outlot 3 would be zoned public institutional for the park space. In general, the zoning classifications are consistent with the surrounding uses. The existing campus at Epic is zoned SI. The remaining of Epic lands are zoned RA, and obviously park lands in the city are zoned public institutional as well. So it is consistent with the areas, the zoning in the area and also in the rest of the city. One thing important to note is that with the future expansion of Epic, if it does occur in the future, those would require public hearings and more amendments to their group development. So just because it's being zoned SI, it would come back to the Plan Commission in some fashion as well, because it would require that process to have the Plan Commission review it and also have the Common Council review it as well. Part of the zoning ordinance requirements is have the city go through findings of facts for the rezoning to ensure that it is consistent with the city's plans and the city, more importantly, the city's comprehensive plan. We find this is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. We've identified this area as a expansion area for Epic as a part of their future campuses on the northwest side of the city. So with that, staff is recommending that the Plan Commission provide the Common Council, to recommend the Common Council approve it with the condition that the zoning on this property does not become effective until it's approved by the Common Council and by the Circuit Court. So that the zoning as shown on the screen here will only become effective, as we discussed previously, when the court approves it.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. We are now open for discussion or any possible action. Are there any potential motions or comments or questions? Again, this one would be a recommendation to the Common Council. Mr. Linder?
I've got, my first question is the area marked for rural agricultural, is that land that public use land at all, or is it just Epic land that public will not be able to use? I know there's currently a walking path and part of that.
I believe the walking path will be incorporated as part of the road improvements, and a lot of the land adjacent to those homes will be bermed. I know they're going to be working with each individual property owner to make sure that they kind of can accommodate those needs. I think technically it's a private area owned by Epic, but I mean, it's up to Epic. I mean, I think in the past they've been flexible. I know their campus is open. Steve, if you want to comment on that.
Something the neighbors are interested in knowing.
That zoning is exactly like the zoning that's on the south part between, on the south part of Westridge, and we've always let the public on that land. I mean, if you go and start building campfires or whatnot, we might have a little bit of a concern. But as far as out there walking in that area, I mean, to us, it's green space, and it's for our people and for our neighbors to use.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's the question, is it, just walk through with their dog or
Oh, yeah, I
family,
mean,
stuff like that.
it's no different than what you see in the south part of the campus, between Northern Lights and the south part of Westridge. It's exactly the same type of thing.
Go ahead, Mr. Linder.
The second question is, I don't know if I'm missing something here, but where that intersection is, where Cross Country Road and Northern Lights will be now, we talk about relining the road. Is that intersection, do we just approve that too? I guess I meant to ask a question on what kind of interchange that was.
Mr. Gunlock?
That's a signalized interchange, 4 lanes from the north, 4 lanes through the intersection, then and dropping to 2 lanes farther to the south. Going west, the extension of Cross Country Road is 2 lanes with a right turn lane and a left turn lane.
Has that been approved?
Well, the right-of-way has been approved in the CSM, but again, if there have to be changes made or modifications, if that intersection's gotta go north or south or east or west a little bit, we can do it by changing the CSM. But it will be a signalized intersection.
Okay. I was just wondering what kind of semi-signals you're gonna have on that. I mean, the reason I'm asking is it looks like a prime spot for a roundabout instead of having 12 signalized intersections like by Farm and Fleet. There's a big advantage to roundabouts as opposed to lights. I know there's issue of, be able to get in traffic if they're really busy at Epic, but
Well, we had looked at a roundabout and a decision was made that a signalized intersection at this location was better than a roundabout.
Mr. Burns, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm, just to clarify, the recommendation in the traffic study is for a traffic signal at that location. The traffic study did evaluate other alternatives, including the roundabout, as Mr. Gunlock indicated. At this time, the city council has not taken action to approve a design or a construction for that area. So I
Okay.
think the recommendation is the traffic signal, but I don't want anyone to be left with the impression that the council has formally approved that at this point.
all right. So the action before we're relining the road, I was thinking up to that cross-country road point, but it did not include the intersection? Or is that part of it when they approve it next week? The certified survey map adjustment we just talked about?
Mr. Burns?
The certified survey map would establish the right-of-way that would be established. I think as we had the discussion on the previous item, depending on exactly as the design of the roadway and the intersections are done, if there is the need to adjust those right-of-way lines, that can be done through the CSM process. But the CSMs would establish right-of-way for both the road and the intersection.
But not the configuration of the intersection?
No, it's essentially just dedicating right-of-way at this point. And I believe that's based on the
Okay.
recommendations from the study, but it's not approving a design for the
Okay.
intersection.
Will that come before us or just the council?
The
And
actual design,
Public
contract,
Works.
and approval would go through the Public Works Committee and then to the council. So unless there was a need to come back to the Plan Commission for adjustment to the right-of-way lines, I would say it would be a Public Works and Council item.
Okay.
Mr. Heinzen?
I'll actually follow up on what Jack had asked about this. The intersection, if it was determined, the council determined that a roundabout would be the better choice, is this gonna provide enough right-of-way to accommodate a roundabout, or would the city then be in the position where they would have to, we would have to condemn property in order to put a roundabout in? And if that's the case, should that be part of our discussion right now with Epic?
Mr. Gunlock?
Well, it depends upon the size of the roundabout, how much right-of-way is needed, and what the center core area is gonna be. A 2-lane roundabout may require a little additional right-of-way. But again, if a roundabout was decided to be the better option, which it was not in the TIA, in the traffic analysis, then the city would have to negotiate with Epic for that additional right-of-way and the changing of the CSM to increase the right-of-way area, if additional right-of-way was needed. Right now, there is sufficient area to cover the reconstruction of Northern Lights Road, and probably more than sufficient, being 180 feet. Existing Northern Lights is in 120 foot of right-of-way. So there's the right-of-way, we've got 60 feet of additional right-of-way there. So depending on the final design of Northern Lights, there may be a modification that actually ends up reducing that right-of-way. Once the road is designed, and if we only need 120 feet, there may be 120, or there may be 60 feet that goes back to green space on the east side.
Mr. Dickman.
I can assure the city and this group that Epic will provide whatever land is necessary for the intersection as approved by the traffic committee and the city council.
Thank you, Mr. Dickman. Mr. Linder?
Mr. Dickman, I got one more question. Sorry. So assuming this road gets approved by the council, including Meister Drive, when can we expect construction to start or be completed?
Well, the current thought is we would, first of all, we'd build the berm, and we'd finish off the connection from Meister, from the Meister Westridge subdivision to Nine Mound Road. Get the berm in, get it planted, all landscaped. Then we would build the realigned Northern Lights Road. I would anticipate that, depending upon scheduling, the earliest, we may be building the berm, assuming everything gets approved, late summer. And if the sun and moon and stars all align properly, we'd be working on Northern Lights and try to get it rebuilt before Thanksgiving. If it isn't rebuilt before Thanksgiving and the asphalt plant shut down around Thanksgiving, then it would be finished in the spring.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dickman. Further, Mr. Lytle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just so we're clear, any tweaks to the right-of-way at that intersection that would require a new CSM wouldn't require the somewhat extraordinary steps of circuit court approval that we've gone through here, or would we be in for another round of that?
Mr. Sayre?
No, it would just be a minor CSM modification.
Good question. Mr. Horsfall?
I just question, has any of the utilities been put in at Cross Point or Meister or any of that kind of stuff?
Mr. Gunlock?
Are we losing some money for sunken costs that?
There are existing utilities under existing Northern Lights Road, and depending on how Epic lays out their future campuses, they may or may not be used. If they're going to be abandoned, then with the reconstruction of Northern Lights, there would be at least a water main run up through there. Sanitary sewer is basically gets connected into the Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District, which has a large 30-inch interceptor in the Greenway.
In the current Northern Lights Greenway? Is that
Yes. And the new Greenway pretty much follows that existing Greenway. And our easements will cover any areas that are outside of that Greenway.
Further questions or comments on this agenda item? Again, it would be a recommended action to the Common Council. We do not have a motion on this agenda item. What is your pleasure, Mr. Horsfall?
Hey, I'd like to make a recommendation for approval to the council for the zoning map amendment to rezone multiple parcels located within Epic Plat, Cross Point Plat, and the Meister Addition to West Ridge Plat from their current zoning classifications of rural agricultural, neighborhood residential, community residential, mixed residential, urban residential, suburban commercial, and public institutional to suburban industrial, rural agricultural, and public institutional. The proposed zoning map amendment will allow the realignment of Northern Lights Road and the future expansion of Epic Campus, open space, and parkland. With the common council's approval and circuit court approval. That sound about right?
That's correct. With that recommendation from staff.
Yes.
You've heard the motion. Is there a second? Mr. Heinz, second by Mr. Heinzen. We are now open for discussion on the motion. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no.
No.
We'll let the minutes reflect that Mr. Linder voted no. Motion passes. Next, we have discussion and possible action regarding a petition by Epic Systems Corporation to annex approximately 40.88 acres of land into the city of Verona. The proposed annexation is located in the northeast quarter of the southwest quarter of Section 8, Township 6 North, Range 8 East, Town of Verona. Specifically, the parcel is identified as a parcel number 062/068-083-8000-7. Mr. Sayre, if you provide the background, please.
Epic is proposing to annex land located at 2826 Country View Road that's approximately 40 acres in size. Their intent is to use the land as a geothermal bore field, to construct a stormwater management pond, and also to construct a substation on the property. This is what you'd call a unanimous consent petition. It's one owner. There's no one lives on the property, so it's processed in that fashion as state statute requires. As it requires state law, we have to review it to make sure it's consistent with our comprehensive plan. And it does, because our comprehensive plan says the North Future Urban Growth Area, as identified in the comp plan, states North Future Urban Growth Area will be residential purposes except the western portion where expansions of the existing corporate campuses are anticipated. We find the request consistent with that. This is part of Epic's lands. The land itself is going to be used as a stormwater pond for part of their campus, and it's consistent with what the comprehensive plan says.
You have heard the background from Mr. Sayre. We are open for discussion or any potential motions. This would be another item that would be a recommendation to the Common Council. What is your pleasure? Mr. Lytle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for the sake of discussion, can we explain the rationale for these lands needing to be within the city versus remaining in the town and being owned as such?
Mr. Dickman?
Yeah, this land is located just east of Country View Road. It's adjacent to our other lands. The geothermal system that we have is a unified system. The electrical system we have on the campus is a unified electrical system. As we're developing these systems and installing these systems, to have all of the system in one jurisdiction helps immensely as far as getting various approvals. For example, we can have the city of Verona approve our work on this site. Otherwise, part of our job would be working with the city of Verona, other was the town and Dane County and a variety of jurisdictions. It makes it immensely easier to get a unified system done that way.
Further questions for Mr. Dickman? Mr. Linder?
Would this then go to the Regional Planning Commission?
No, this isn't bringing it into CARPC. It
Okay.
isn't bringing it into the urban
Just
service.
annexation at
It's
this
just
point.
annexation, no urban service expansion.
Mr. Lytle?
I do think it's important to point out that the density of the city is a common metric brought up when we approach the Regional Plan Commission, CARPC, and this would have a negative impact on city density in terms of dwelling units or population. So that doesn't necessarily make this a bad thing, but I do think we need to go into this eyes wide open that 40 acres with 0 residents would have an impact on density.
Very good point again. Thank you, Patrick. Mr. Horsfall?
Is the current geothermal bore field zoned RA?
Yes.
it just seems counterintuitive to me that, it's okay that it is, it just doesn't feel like rural agriculture to have a borehole that's producing energy.
Except it's, the bore shafts and the piping is 5 feet underground. And
Yeah.
topsoil is put back and you grow crops on top of it.
I was thinking more of the ultimate function of the land. It's not to produce crops, produce energy, which is more of
both.
more of a resource type. But I don't know if there's anything else that would make sense, but that's just a comment more than anything else.
Utilities in that district is a permitted use as well. It's kind of a different kind of district because it does allow utility. So that's why the substation use actually works quite well, because it's a permitted use in that district. So that's probably the rationale and thinking behind it, along with the fact they're growing crops over it as well. And just the name.
It's a
does-
minor point that
yeah,
it's,
the name
there's
doesn't
crops
allow it.
there. It's just, it's more of a, if you built an underground mine and we're grabbing coal out of there, that would be a different, what's the difference between coal and geothermal energy? It's energy. Someone could argue the point, but I'm fine with RA, just curious.
Further discussion or potential action? What's your pleasure? I will make a motion to recommend to the Common Council, agenda item number 7. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Linder. Further discussion on the motion? Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Thank you, everyone.
So in the future, I'll just have to say the number and that'll be good.
We were ready, you read it once, so I think that was for the benefit of those watching at home. It's good, so, but that could work. We are on agenda item number 8, which is discussion and possible action regarding a certified survey map to modify lot lines for lots number 268 and lot 269 of Cathedral Point plat. Mr. Sarah, please.
The applicant's proposing to modify the lot lines of lots 268 and 269 as shown on the screen in front of you. They're basically going to shift the lot line between the two properties 8 feet to the south. And this is probably a good example of a minor CSM amendment. We've kind of talked about plats versus CSMs. This is a simple one that to just shift the lot line, they just have to come in and modify the CSM. We took a look at the new lots that would be created. They still conform to the minimum lot size of the zoning district, which is 8,000 square feet. The corner lot that's being increased in size, those are more challenging lots because they have double frontage on them. So we think the shift is actually a good thing. They're doing it because they have a prospective buyer who needs a little extra space to fit their home on the lot. With that being said, we recommend the Plan Commission provide the Common Council a recommendation to approve the certified survey map for Cathedral Point subdivision.
You've heard the explanation. Is there discussion or any potential action? Again, this would be a recommendation to the Common Council. Mr. Linder?
I'll make a motion to recommend to the Common Council approval of the certified survey map for lots 268 and 269 in the Cathedral Point subdivision.
We have a motion by Mr. Linder. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Lytle. Further discussion on the motion? Mr. Horsfall?
Just a quick question. What is the minimum size lot for this?
8,000 square feet.
8,000. Thanks.
Further questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And that motion carries. We are now on agenda item number 9, which is discussion and possible action regarding site plan review for the Madison Area Youth Soccer Association to construct a championship field, accessory building, and site enhancements located in Redden Soccer Park at 550 Cross Country Road. Mr. Sarah, if you would provide the background, please.
The applicant's proposing to construct their Phase 2 improvements to Redden Soccer Park, and these would include a new soccer field, team benches, ticketing plaza, bleacher seating, a digital scoreboard, a press box, medical facility, and a park memorial. If you recall, this was actually before you at the last Plan Commission meeting for the initial review. What they've refined since that, nothing else has changed except they've refined the look of the actual the building itself. This will be a sports medicine facility for athletes when they're injured during events. It'll also be used probably for the 3 seasons, probably spring, summer, and fall. So even when events are not occurring in the site, they will be using that for sports medicine and training and rehabilitating athletes. The building itself would be constructed of brick, which would match the monument sign that is currently, as you enter the park, is visible. It'd be the same brick material as that sign. The roof would have a slight pitch to it to match the existing other buildings that are on the site itself. They've added a awning type feature to provide when people are having rehabilitation work done inside there. They have a nice view of the fields and look forward to a goal. It also serves a dual purpose in that during poor weather, people could stand under it and actually be sheltered from the elements, which is probably an asset to the field itself. The west elevation will have these 3 square windows. The north elevation, which is not shown, is just a blank wall, but that is facing the existing building that's on site, which lacks much architectural detail. The columns, as shown here, have actually gotten a little bit smaller. They've shrunken that down a little bit, and they've also shifted the signage out into the front of the columns itself to help identify that facility for people. They want to make it an identifiable facility, so when people are injured, they know where to go. They know which is the building to go to. So with that being said, this is a site plan approval. Staff is recommending the Plan Commission approve the site plan for the Redden Park improvements.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. And also, Mr. Lay is in the audience this evening, so I'm sure that, Chris, if there are any questions, you'd be more than happy to respond to the questions. We are open for discussion or potential action. This is the last item on the agenda where it would be a recommendation to the Common Council. Are there questions, comments, or any potential action at this point? I'm sorry, I made a mistake. This one is not, will not be acted on by the Common Council. Its action here at the Plan Commission would be final action. So sorry about that. Mr. Horsfall?
This time I'd like to make a recommendation to the, approve the site plan review, or site plan for the Madison Area Youth Soccer Association, to construct a championship fields accessory building and the site enhancements located at Redden's Soccer Park at 550 Cross Country Road.
We have a motion by Mr. Horsfall. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Heinzen. We are open for discussion on the motion. Are there further questions or comments on that motion? Mr. Lytle?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There were a couple of questions or requests made by the neighbor, the nearest neighbor. I believe she's to the east of the facility, around keeping the current operating hours and questions regarding the potential addition of concessions, including alcohol sales. Recognizing that those issues may not fall under the Plan Commission's purview, whether there's any response we can give to that property owner in terms of those concerns.
It's my understanding the hours of operation won't change, so what's occurring out there right now is going to be the same even once these improvements take place. And regarding the concession, I think you said sale of alcohol, I think you said. I'm not aware of that. If that were to occur, they'd have to come back to the city to amend their licensing. So that'd be a licensing issue if they were to decide to do that in the future.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Lay. Next, we have discussion, and we're not anticipating any action. This is agenda item number 10, which is initial precise implementation plan review for the West End development to construct 40 apartment units located south of West End Circle. Mr. Sayre, if you would, please.
Thank you. The applicant is proposing to construct 40 apartment units and 2,100 square feet of commercial space in the West End development. This project was before you last month. There's been a couple minor modifications, and the developers actually will be here tonight to answer your questions as well. But in a nutshell, it's mostly the same project that you saw last meeting as well, but I'll do a quick overview of what's occurred in the past. Before you on the screen is actually the approved GDP. This is the General Development Plan that was initially approved in 2007. I think it was amended in 2011. And what has been constructed so far out here are these the bluish purplish buildings, the apartment units out there. And currently there are 106 apartment units. The GDP, when it was approved, allocated for 146. So what the developer is proposing tonight is 40 on top of what they've built already, their 106, to bring them to that 146. That is the final total number that was actually initially submitted in the GDP and has been approved in the GDP itself. The proposed building would be located on the southern end of the site, approximately here, in a similar location as to what was previously approved in the GDP. The GDP in that area called for a restaurant on the front end of it, and then also a mixed-use building, which would be a commercial or office on the first floor, and then apartments on the second and third floor. The building itself would have the 2,100 square feet of commercial space on the front side. The applicant intends to either lease that to a fitness center, or they would operate that as a private fitness facility for the people renting the apartments. Parking has gone unchanged from the last submittal. It'd be consistent with what has been approved in the GDP and previous plans as well. The architecture would match what is out there. In the past, the developer has talked about doing a live-work unit on the first floor. It's my understanding they've decided not to do that. It would just be an apartment look to it, along with that front northern facing that would have that commercial look to it as well. Renderings, as shown on the screen here, once again, consistent with what's out there. A few things to point out from a staff standpoint. We do have a residential phasing policy that was put in place in 2012, which does limit the amount of multifamily units the city will approve each year to 25 to 50. To date, in 2013, we have not received any multifamily requests besides this one. So right now we stand at 0. We've approved none so far this year. One of the things I'd also like to point out as well, from a staff standpoint, we've taken a look at this and tried to look at is the request consistent with the GDP of what's out there. And from a staff standpoint, we think it is consistent. The point of the general development plan, the GDP, is it generally consistent with what was approved in 2011? And generally, we feel this building is. The overall GDP allocated 146 apartment units. They're adding 40 additional ones, which would bring to that 146 which they were granted. It's also positioned in a similar location that the previous building in the GDP was also shown as well. So we do think it is consistent. With that said, though, as the developer moves forward and refines these plans for this project, we encourage him to take a broader view if he decides to come forward in the future for more apartments or for wherever the changes would be. Look at the entire project and review the entire GDP as a whole to see what the future intentions of the developer is to develop this land. Is it still feasible to have all the commercial out there? I don't know. The market has changed from when this was initially submitted back in 2007. A lot of things have changed. So we encourage the developer to take a broad look at it in the future as he continues to refine his plans. So with that, as the mayor said, there is no motion. This is just the initial discussion of it to provide the developer feedback on the project.
Mr. Heinzen.
It would be helpful if we could go back, not to 2011, but to the very beginning.
Steve, can you turn your mic on, please?
Excuse me, to go back to, I don't know if it was 2007 or the beginning, because I think that we approved originally with 146 units, if that's right, but they were completely in different places than where the units are right now. And maybe you could just walk us through again where the plan was as initially proposed, way back when. And is it the case that all of the units were going to be in the section that is, shows up as the yellow gold here? Because my recollection is the purple were going to be, some sort of office commercial spaces.
Mr. Wall.
Sure. The original plan included apartments in other locations than we have currently, as you call the gold color. Also, if you look down at the bottom to the left of the GDP that's up here, You'll see that we also had residential planned at the southern end of the site as well. Could be